Hamas announces release of 6 detainees from Gaza tomorrow as part of the ceasefire agreement. Hamas dismisses threats from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and reaffirms commitment to the Gaza ceasefire agreement. And Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, orders military to intensify operations in the West Bank after bus explosions near Tel Aviv. Hello there, good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock and it's Cairo local time. You're watching Q News. We begin today's bulletin with the latest from Gaza. Hamas has announced that it will release 6 detainees from Gaza tomorrow as part of the ceasefire agreement. In a statement issued on Friday, Hamas revealed the names of those set to be released: Elia Maimun Isaac Cohen, Omar Shem Tov, Omar Finka, Tal Shoham, Avira Mangisto, and Hishem El Sayed. This development comes amid ongoing negotiations surrounding the ceasefire, with further details expected to emerge in the coming hours. The Detainees Affairs Commission has announced that Israel will release 602 Palestinian detainees tomorrow as part of a detainee exchange agreement. According to the Commission, those set to be released include 50 detainees serving life sentences, 60 with high sentences, 47 rearrested from Al-Ahrar group, and 445 detainees from Gaza who were arrested after October the 7th. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Hamas did not hand over the body of Shiri Bibas among the remains returned to Israel yesterday. Instead, he claimed that the body delivered belongs to a woman from Gaza. Netanyahu accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip and emphasized that Israel will act with full force to ensure the return of all detainees held in Gaza. Meanwhile, for its part, Hamas has dismissed threats made by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, reaffirming its commitment to implementing the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. The group acknowledged the possibility of a mix-up in the remains due to Israeli airstrikes and stated that it is investigating Israel's claims regarding the body handed over instead of Shiri Bibas's remains. Hamas pledged to announce the findings once the verification process is complete. Also, Hamas demanded Israel return the body that Netanyahu claimed belonged to a Palestinian woman killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Israeli media citing families of detainees reported that the government must act swiftly to recover the remains of Shiri Bibas and secure the release of all detainees in Gaza. The families stressed that Israel must take full responsibility for ensuring adherence to the ceasefire agreement and warned against any leniency in enforcing its terms. They also emphasized that recent developments highlighted the urgency of advancing the prisoner exchange deal and securing the immediate return of all detainees. An Israeli court has imposed a 3-week media blackout on the investigation into the attack on buses in Bat Yam. Yesterday, 3 explosive devices detonated on 3 buses parked in different locations across the city near central Tel Aviv. Authorities have yet to release further details due to the ongoing investigation. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered the military to ramp up operations in the occupied West Bank following a series of bus explosions near Tel Aviv on Thursday. During a visit to the Tulkarm refugee camp, Katz said in a video message that he instructed troops to intensify military activities in the region. Israel had already widely been involved in a crackdown during this time and has already launched a wide-scale crackdown on the West Bank on July 21st, just 2 days after the ceasefire deal with Hamas in Gaza. In recent weeks, tens of thousands of Palestinians have led
אני מזהיר את המחבלים ששוחררו ליהודה ושומרון במסגרת העסקה להחזרת החטופים. אנחנו פוקחים עליכם עין, וכל מעורבות של מישהו מכם בביצוע ובהכוונת טרור תעלה לכם מיידית במחיר הכבד ביותר.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered a military operation in the West Bank in response to the bus bombings in Bat Yam. Meanwhile, the Israeli army announced that it has deployed 3 additional battalions in the West Bank this morning following Netanyahu's decision. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has called for the immediate destruction of Hamas, accusing the group of continuing to violate the ceasefire agreement. Smotrich warned that any delay in eliminating Hamas would reflect weakness within Israel and could lead to grave consequences similar to those of October the 7th. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for irreversible progress toward a two-state solution and an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Speaking at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean in Rome, Guterres said the Middle East is experiencing a period of profound transformation, marked by uncertainty but also opportunities. "40 injured and sick Palestinians, accompanied by 68 family members, crossed the Rafah border crossing into Egypt for medical treatment in Egyptian hospitals. Over the past week, hundreds of aid trucks have entered Gaza through Rafah, carrying humanitarian supplies and fuel. Also, mobile homes, heavy equipment, bulldozers, and demolition machinery have been transported into Gaza in preparation for reconstruction efforts. The Refugee Affairs Department has warned of escalating attacks on refugee camps in Gaza and the West Bank, coinciding with Israel's efforts to determine UNRWA operations. It reported that camps in northern West Bank are facing severe destruction, with 935 military raids since October 7, 2023. The attacks have resulted in over 400 deaths, more than 1,250 injuries, and the arrest of 2,368 people. Also, over 800 housing units have been destroyed, leaving many families displaced. Now, for more on this, we cross over to the newsroom where Mona is there. Mona.
Thank you so much, Mark. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al Ahram newspaper managing editor Mohammed Izzeddin. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Izzeddin, and welcome to Qnews. If I may ask, or start by asking, what could be the broader implications of the detainee exchange for the ongoing ceasefire negotiations, and could it lead to a permanent truce or rather further escalations?
Welcome to you, and thank you, and thank you for Qnews for having me. Of course, these incidents and these bombings are very extraordinary. There has been no victims, and there are no leads or information announced by the Israeli side, and therefore there are doubts and suspicions regarding who's responsible for these bombings, or more clearly, what will be the implication of such bombings. Of course, there are endeavors by the far-right officials to complete the annexation of the West Bank, this coincides with ruling out the Shabak and Mossad from the negotiations, which is more control to the political aspect in the negotiation path, and deciding to go back to the war, which is highly desired by the far right and Netanyahu, and also continuing the occupation and the annexation of more Palestinian lands. Here, of course, what we're going to see is that the Israeli military operations will continue in the West Bank, and the Israeli media talked about pushing 3 military brigades to the West Bank, which means that there is an escalated operation will be launched by the Israeli troops. Of course, this also will have a very negative impact on the negotiation path in Gaza, despite that so far it has been going very well, and despite what has been stated by the Israeli side regarding the mix-up of one of the Israeli detainees due to the airstrikes launched on Gaza, we are hopeful that this incident does not have further implications on the negotiation path, especially that the Palestinian resistance delivered the name of 6 detainees to be exchanged tomorrow for the Palestinian detainees, and the second phase of the ceasefire negotiations will take place, and with starting the reconstruction equipment and mobile homes crossing the Rafah crossing, and the great role played by the mediators, including Egypt, played during the past few days to continue the ceasefire agreement in Gaza.
Right, Mr. Izzadeen, there has been also this mix-up issue that occurred in the remains of one of the detainees, Sherry Bibas, and how would you think that will reflect on the ongoing negotiations, particularly that Hamas acknowledged the possibility of this mix-up due to the Israeli airstrikes?
If there is well intention here, and of course we do not see that from the Israeli side, Hamas recognized this mix-up between the remains due to the Israeli airstrikes, so the victims was mixed up, and consequently Hamas said that they will try to reconsider and to put more scrutiny into this, and going back to the Israeli side with a result. The Israeli side, whether the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu or the far right officials, are practicing all pressures possible to go back to the war by any means possible. There is a third party here, which is the loved ones of the detainees, and who are also pressuring the government to bring back the detainees and continuing the ceasefire agreement phases, which is creating some kind of balance in addition to the US pressure on the Israeli government, giving the promise to continue the ceasefire agreement. If the ceasefire agreement is violated, this equation will set the map for the next few days. If the ceasefire will continue as planned or not, I think with the Palestinian resistance announcing the 6 names to be released tomorrow on Saturday, I think this will give hope, and that the Palestinian negotiating side from the resistance is committing to the ceasefire items, and it will look in the possibility of mixing up the remains that were delivered to the Israeli side. It is a very positive stance from the Palestinian resistance. And I think that the handover tomorrow will go as planned without any hindrances, especially that there are a lot of pressure from the international community and the Israeli interior to complete the handover as planned, in addition to the pressures practiced by Cairo and Qatar to continue the ceasefire agreement as planned.
Right, with Israel's further escalation, intensifying military operations in the West Bank, as you said, respectively, how might this reflect on the stability of the region, particularly in light of the recent ceasefire agreement and the detainee exchange?
Whether these bombings were the doing of some far-right parties or security bodies that are seeking to fail the ceasefire agreement negotiations, or they are seeking continuing the war and the existence of military troops in the West Bank, which was what happened during the past 24 hours. 3 more brigades were deployed in the West Bank, which means that there is a scheme to continue the annexation of West Bank territories and shifting away from violating the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, and a possibility to go back anytime if the Israeli detainees were not released. And consequently, I do not think that this incident, whether was it the doing of the Palestinian side or the doing of the far-right Israeli parties or security authorities, especially that there were no victims and the bombings were in places of parking lots and parking areas,
right,
and there were no people around.
Yes, plus there has been a blackout from an Israeli court, which is very suspicious. Now that was from Cairo. Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor Mohammed Dean, we thank you so much for joining us here on Q News, and back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mona, and Mona will be back with us shortly with In Depth here on Q News. Now let's get the latest developments from Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
الوضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam has called for US pressure on Israel to ensure a full withdrawal from the areas it still occupies in Lebanon as soon as possible. Salam stressed that Israel has no military or security justification for maintaining control over several points in southern Lebanon. Despite a ceasefire agreement requiring a complete withdrawal, Israel has announced its intention to retain 5 military positions in the region. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has reaffirmed efforts to strengthen the cessation of hostilities in Lebanon and support the government. He said that the United Nations is working to help build a stable Lebanese state capable of ensuring security for all its citizens. The Israeli army launched airstrikes overnight on the border area between Syria and Lebanon, targeting the western countryside of Homs province in central Syria. According to Lebanese media, the strikes hit border crossings on the Syrian side as well as vehicles with Lebanese license plates. In Syria, a United Nations report has revealed that Syria has lost approximately $800 billion in GDP over 14 years of conflict. According to the UN Development Programme, the prolonged war has set Syria's economy and social progress back by nearly 40 years. And from Lebanon and Syria, we now move to the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Kremlin has confirmed that there is a mutual understanding on the need for a meeting between US President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, but no specifics have been determined yet. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that both leaders have expressed interest in the talks, which were discussed during Russian and American delegations meeting in Riyadh. He emphasized that preparations are ongoing to ensure the meeting is as productive as possible. Peskov also reiterated that Russia remains open to negotiations regarding Ukraine, saying that Moscow is ready to achieve its national security and strategic goals through peaceful means. While discussions continue, the timing and location of the Trump-Putin meeting remains undecided. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that he'd held a productive meeting with Keith Kellogg, the US Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, in Kyiv. In a social media post, Zelensky said that discussions focused on the battlefield situation, the return of prisoners of war, and securing effective security guarantees for Ukraine. He described the meeting as one that restores hope. Zelensky expressed gratitude to the United States for its ongoing assistance and bipartisan support and emphasized Ukraine's readiness to sign a strong and effective investment and security agreement with President Trump. Ukrainian soldiers from the 68th Brigade have intensified urban warfare training as tensions continue to rise. Troops are seen conducting combat drills, maneuvering through urban environments, and strategizing for battle as they prepare for further engagements. In a video footage from a region of the country, soldiers can be seen practicing tactical maneuvers, hiding behind buildings, and using drones for reconnaissance. The training comes as Ukrainian forces face intensified Russian attacks, now targeting that region after ongoing battles in Donetsk and Luhansk. Attack by Russia. According to Ukrainian officials, Russia launched a total of 160 drones and 2 missiles in the assault. No damage or casualties were reported in the capital, Kyiv, though gunfire and explosions were heard as the city's air defenses worked to intercept the drones. Russia has said that its forces shot down a Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jet and targeted energy facilities supporting the Ukrainian military-industrial complex. According to a statement from Russia's defense ministry, their forces also struck Ukrainian ammunition depots, electronic warfare stations, and other targets. Also, Russian air defenses reportedly intercepted multiple rockets, aerial bombs, and over 100 drones. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported that it had repelled Russian attacks in multiple directions, with dozens of battles taking place along the front lines throughout the day. Thank you for watching our main bulletin this afternoon, but here's a recap of the main headlines. Hamas announces release of 6 detainees from Gaza tomorrow as part of the ceasefire agreement. Hamas dismisses threats from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and reaffirms commitment to the Gaza ceasefire. Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, orders military to intensify the operations in the West Bank after a bus exploded in Tel Aviv. And that's all for now, but don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more here on Q News.